In my last video, I looked at why improvisation is important to belly dance and gave an overview. In this video, I'm going to start with some simple exercises for beginners to teach them or begin to teach them improvisation. Hi, I'm Kashmir and I really like improvisation. I like doing it and I like watching good improvisation. Even though it's an art, you can teach it. Instead of teaching steps, however, you teach how to listen to the music and how to move to the music. It's important not to scare the students. For this reason, I no longer use the circle of death. I don't know if you use the circle of death. That's when you have people in a circle and you take turns at moving. Now there are a couple of variations. In one variation you stay in the circle and the move gets passed around, so each person stands where they are and does a little bit. And in other variations the people come in either in order or having something thrown at them and they catch it and they come into the middle and they perform in the middle. Either way, one person's performing and everybody is looking. For some people this is their chance to shine, and some people have difficulty getting out of the middle of the circle. But one day I came downstairs from my studio and there was a student who had just been in class sitting in her car with her hands on the steering wheel, sobbing her heart out. She had found the exercise so stressful she couldn't drive. And you'll be not surprised to hear that despite my attempts at comfort and my apologies, she never came to class again. And I never used the circle of death again. So what do I do? Well, apart from that first not really improvised thing, on the second week, when they've actually got a little bit more vocabulary and they're a little bit more relaxed, we start an exercise where we do it in pairs. So that not the whole class, just you and your friend. And what's more, you're not even looking at each other. They're standing behind each other and slightly to the side. Usually also with their backs to the mirror. The person in front moves, the person behind copies. So they think it's a copying exercise. See, you've got to fool them. So the person in front is always correct. So even if their technique is lousy, the person behind, in theory, should cover it as much as they can. So with beginner students, usually they can't get all the bits. I usually say get the feet and the hips and see what else you can get. So they're there, they're copying, and at some point they turn around, in which case the person who was in the back is now in the front, the person who was in the front is now in the back, and then they continue this way. They have got control. They can change. So if they're finding it too stressful after 8 counts, they can flip themselves around. In a bad situation, you might have 2 nervous people and they keep flipping every couple of bars, which is amusing. The idea is to keep it short, really accessible music, preferably clearly with little clear breaks that they can actually know, oh, that sounds like a good time to change. I have a short melody track I normally use for this, but also it's familiar. So I've actually used this track for the 2 lessons beforehand for them to actually do drilling to. So it's not completely unfamiliar and they get it and they go. So from here we can make it slightly harder because we can use the same idea week after week. We can actually get them to face each other. That's a lot more stressful. So you might not want to try that with some people. You might also want to actually take the control away from them. So you might tell them when to change moves. This will also, if you do it correctly, give them an idea of how the music is phrased. So we've done a verse, now we change. We've done a chorus, now we change. You can also throw in something like, you can't change until you've done that such and such move. So if you've just learned a figure 8, for example, they're completely free to do what they like, but they cannot change over until they've thrown in at least one figure 8. Okay, where do we go from here? Well, next we need to actually get them moving alone, by themselves. Please do not just turn on a track and say, dance! I did have a teacher who used to do that. I sometimes wonder now whether she just run out of things to do at the end of the class. That's really stressful. Don't do it. So some of the things you could do to sort of lead into it, you could listen to the music with them. With a more experienced class, you might ask questions about it, like, does anyone know the name of the song? Or what sort of music is this? This is also a chance at this point to do a little teaching. You know, you can give them the names of some of the more common and well-known songs. You can introduce different styles of music. Oh, this is Zaidi, or this is Arabic pop, or this is a little Khaliji piece. So they actually get an idea of what the music sounds like and have a label to stick with it. Or don't use anything too complicated with newer dancers. So it depends on the level of your dancers. But even with the most inexperienced dancers, you can ask things like, what sort of moves do you think goes with this? Is this a shimmy type move? Is this a slow one? Do we have accents in here? What are we going to do with them? You can also talk about any repeats and how they get changed and how they might want to think about doing, handling that change. And if there's a motif in there, you may wish to play just the motif a few times so they can actually get an idea. Okay, for this motif, everyone's going to do and you can actually work it from there. You can also give them a crutch in that you can tell them what to do. Now this seems like contrary to what I've just said. But for example, you might say to them, I want you to include hip drops in this. Or I want you to include a shimmy in this. Or you can get really mean and say, I want you to dance this just with horizontal moves. Or I want you to dance this with only horizontal circles and hip drops. So you can limit them. You can be kind and actually say, having listened to this music, what moves do you think would work well? Pick 2. And then those 2 moves is the only things they should use. Keep an eye on them because they sometimes cheat. You can randomize it. You can use dice. So I have a list of moves and they can throw a couple of dice and it picks them that way. You can use a spinner to do the same thing, or you can do lucky dip. You might want to consider, if you do that, to have different bowls. So you might have a bowl of smooth moves and a bowl of sharp moves and a bowl of walking steps or something like that, so they can pick one from each. So that's another way of doing it. What this does is shuts down that bit of the brain that says, oh, what do I know? What do I know? What moves do I know? What haven't I done? They don't have to think. They just know they've got to fit the moves into the music. And it does make it easier, and it seems to quieten it down a wee bit. And it also stops them from dancing with every move they know. I mean, take a look at a good dancer. She doesn't do more than a handful of moves in one track. As I said earlier on, keep the music to short, familiar and accessible. And when it comes to short, sometimes I even shorten it a little more. So with a beginner, I might take the first minute of a piece and loop it, if it's an obvious break. So they can actually just work on recognizing that piece of music and thinking how their body is going to follow it. You can also talk about it. So after they've had a go, you might say, oh, that piece where it went meow, which it does several times, how did you handle that? And you might say, oh, I put my arms up, meow. And somebody else might say, well, I did a circle. And then you think, oh, well, have you considered doing something like a figure 8 where you actually extend one loop out on the big slow one and then quick around the other? So you can actually guide them. They can actually feed into each other. So they can give each other ideas. And you can also, at this point, weed out the ideas that don't work too well. Oh, that was really nice, but in a belly dance class, we don't use our hands like that. That was really nice, but no, I don't think jumping actually worked with that piece of music. So you can actually feed back as well as giving them the opportunity. However, to begin with, ignore the performance side. Okay, so there's lots of skills that you need if you're doing an improvisation as performance. It doesn't matter. At this point, all we want to do is to have people moving. Right, so does that work for you? Next video, I'll take it just a wee bit further.